Hello, everyone. My name's Chris Murphy. I'm an Unreal Engine evangelist, and today I'm going to be taking you through what's new in Unreal Engine 5.2. This is a fun session. It's called that because I needed a nice short title for marketing that wasn't actually all the stuff Chris wants to nerd out about that he's kind of keen on that's come out in the last little while. Too verbose. For this session, I'm going to be going through quite a few features. We're going to be going pretty quickly. If you feel like I'm kind of skipping through the exact steps on something, you have my apologies, but it's way more important to me that you kind of get the vibe of certain features and kind of how they generally stick together, rather than necessarily going home and being like, I'm going to make every single one of those things Chris did without issue node by node. And so just keep that in mind as we go through. Now, that said, I do want to kind of focus on a few things. Most of it is 5.2. That said, there's a couple of features that came in with 5.1 that kind of went under the radar. And because of that, I'm a little bit like, the people need to know. So I'm going to be kind of doing my best to kind of step through those things as well. Now, to begin with, I actually want to step through something that's just over here. It's this tree. So I want to step through a feature that came out in Unreal Engine 5.1, which was... I'll roll back a little bit, actually, to explain it. So when UE5 first dropped, Epic was like, hey, we have Nanite now, and that means billions of polys. And everyone was like, that sounds great. What's the catch? And we were like, all right. We have billions of polys as long as there's no world position offset on those meshes, as long as they're not, like, bending and stuff. And we couldn't do masked materials at the time either. But with Unreal Engine 5.1, we now support both world position offset and masking, which means foliage is back on the cards. Actually, it's off the cards because you need to really mesh on a per leaf basis now. That was an intentional joke. So, as I said, we've now got Nanite and Lumen support kind of going on foliage, which means most of your scene can now get by on the Nanite scene, which is really, really valuable because it means it speeds everything up dramatically. Now, that said, with Nanite mentioned, I do kind of want to shoot over here and quickly touch on a feature that I think is really useful within 5.2, which is this. Often when I'm talking to developers about the pipeline, like often I'm talking to developers about Nanite, one of the main things that I hear from people is, we understand that moving forward, we can up-res our assets and have good quality Nanite things, but all the stuff we've made in the past wasn't made to that. How do we take advantage of it? And I'd like to point out that we have a great new feature here to allow for displacement maps to be applied and baked out as Nanite meshes, which means if I get a mesh like this, which when we look at, clearly in the middle here, there's no polys. The outside's already Nanite ready, but the inside is certainly not. So you can see we have a flat surface. If I get something like this and I enable Nanite support, you need to make sure you have a trim relative error set. And then under displacement maps, I've just put in a height map already, okay? And if I click apply, what that will go ahead and do is that will actually displace the mesh. And if I go back to here, you can see we have something that feels a bit more suitable as a Nanite mesh, okay? And that's really, really important because it means that up-resing your existing assets to keep an overall level of consistency and verts across your meshes is able to be held up pretty easily. So I wanted to make sure everyone was aware of that as a feature because I think it's really, really great. Now, the next thing I want to touch on Now, the next thing I want to touch on is over here. I'm actually going to go through something that, honestly, I'm pretty sure that this isn't going to get called out too heavily. So I wanted everyone to be aware of it if they came to my session, which is this render resource viewer, okay? Now, render resource viewer, I bring it up because it's just a really, really straightforward way of looking at where all of your resources are currently going. Previously, if you were looking at memory usage, you'd be looking at just your textures, and then you would be looking at just the buffers as separate things. It's kind of nice to be able to open this up and look at specifically how much usage all of the various buffers are taking up, especially if you've kind of tinkered with your project settings and you're not sure what effect some of those things actually had. So I wanted to make sure everyone was aware of this. I know this isn't as shiny as Nanite or Lumen, but it is very important to everyone who's actually making games. So I wanted to do a bit of a call out on this because it is pretty important. Okay, so moving on from that feature, the next thing I want to touch on is Niagara. Now I'm going to step through Niagara just a little bit, and I'm going to grab this over here that we can see. I'm just going to move it a little bit further this way so we can kind of see what's going on. All right, so over here I have a Niagara system that's kind of causing random drips, okay? Whenever those drips hit the water, I'm causing ripples, and whenever they hit the ground, they're actually just leaving little decals. And I actually mean that as decals, because if I open up this asset, a new feature that we have in 5.2 is the decal renderer. So what this means is that whenever particles hit things, we can now go ahead and leave decals through Niagara in certain places. It's a little thing, or seemingly little thing, but it means that if you have like an explosion that's firing off all sorts of things and they're hitting walls, it's really great to know that if like random particles hit the walls, we can leave little scorch marks on the walls accordingly. You know, it feels a lot more like an effect system than as just a particle system, you know? So having that additional renderer in there, in my opinion, is really, really valuable. And I wanted to make sure everyone was aware of it. Moving on from that, the other feature that I kind of wanted to touch on here was I want to step through the Niagara cache track. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create a new Niagara system. Okay, now Niagara, again, for anyone that's unfamiliar with it, is Unreal Engine's visual effects system. I'm going to open this up. I'm going to create a new one from a template. Let's go ahead and create a gas explosion. Let's go divergence explosion. They're kind of cooler. I'm going to call this ns_explosion. Okay. And if I was to get this and just drag it into the scene, we'll see that. Okay, so we have ourselves a volumetric explosion. It's nice. And let's say we had something like this inside of a cinematic in the scene. Woo, we can spell it. It's okay. I feel compelled to put it in the right directory and set a good example for everyone every time. So I've gone ahead and I've made a sequence here that we're going to put that explosion into. So I'm going to select that, just go ahead and add the explosion. And now we can start to like toy with it as if it's a cinematic. Now, if I bring this in and I hit play, we don't see it immediately because something needs to kind of trigger that explosion if it's just been placed in the world. Then usually what we would do to get around that is we would add a life cycle track. So a life cycle track will trigger the explosion. But if I pause it, you'll see that the explosion keeps continuing. And that's because it's trying to like tick itself irrelevant to the sequence. So within the lifecycle track, I'm going to go properties, and I'm going to set this time to be something that is being forced to tick alongside sequencer. That's how we would usually do these things. And if I bring that in, you can see that I'm now able to kind of scrub through. But let's be real, that's really quite stuttery, right? You know, it's a really high-end effect, so it's calculating a lot of stuff, but that's not exactly smooth. So because of that, it's really important to me that I made everyone aware of this new feature, which is Niagara Cache. So I'm going to add a Niagara Cache track, and I'm going to click Record. And what this will do is this will actually step through the effect and record all of the resulting output variables within the system. So it gets them and it records them and pushes them out. But more importantly, sometimes for this to work properly, because it's in preview, you'll need to quickly restart the sequence that first time after recording. There we go. So see how that's now super responsive? Because it's actually playing back the data instead of like rerunning the entire simulation every time. You get what I mean? And that's really, really valuable because like now if someone is making a cinematic, they know exactly what's going to be playing during the time. We're not kind of just randomly throwing out a particle system and hoping it's as cool an explosion as the last time someone saw it. So we can kind of make sure that that's all really nailed down tight. And I think this will be really good for both games and linear media moving forward. So I want to make sure everyone was aware of it. Now, with Niagara out of the way, I'm actually, I might set that one up to be spawnable, just so we don't see explosions in the background every now and then. Mind you, I guess saying that out loud would make the session feel a lot cooler. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to demo the worst thing to demo on stage at GDC, which is I'm actually going to go through audio, specifically cave ambience, and it's going to be cave ambience while we have all of this noise around us. So hopefully it's okay and we can get through this and it's fine. But the feature I really want to touch on is a pretty cool feature that we added called Soundscape. Now this is a 5.1 feature that came in, but as I said, it slipped under the radar, so not everyone's aware of it. It's really, really cool because how it works is this. If I open up the Soundscape palette, you can see here that my palette has all sorts of colors to paint the sound within my world, okay? We have a soundscape color for drip, bugs, and cave ambience. So each one of these is a different setup for audio to say, hey, whenever the cave, whenever caves are set up, I want to have this kind of audio coming into it and introduce this palette, okay? Now, again, the best way I can describe this is to kind of build it, and then you'll just see it or hear it in action. So I've gone through, I've got drips, bugs, and cave ambience, but I'm going to go ahead and add another one. And to do that, I'm just going to add you, and I'm going to create a new one. So a new soundscape color that I'm going to call SC_birds. Okay, so I've got this birds effect that we've just created, and let's step through what is held in this kind of thing. First off, it has the sound that it wants to play, which in my case is going to be a meta sound that plays bird noises. Now I want to randomize the volume, I want to randomize the pitch. I'm going to scroll down, and I'm actually also going to say, hey, I want you to continuously respawn this sound. I want to have bird noises just randomly every now and then, okay? And I want to spawn them, honestly, the defaults of every 1 to 3 seconds feels pretty good, so let's just roll with that. But I never want to have more than, say, 2 birds playing at a time, because that's just too many birds, and I'm not ready for that right now. Now, we can go here as well and set a minimum spawn distance. This prevents it from spawning birds inside of me, which is bad. So I'm going to set that to 500, and it'll spawn at a maximum distance of 3,500, okay? Now, the final thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go down to Advanced, and I'm going to enable this option that says Position by Trace. Because what Position by Trace lets me do is it's going to go ahead and it's going to spawn audio somewhere off in the distance, right? At which point it's going to trace, in my case, upwards on the Z-axis. I can say Z in America, and then you all look at me, but it's... So we're going to go upwards on the Z-axis, right? At which point we're going to find a position on the roof to play that noise from, right? Because that's the way we end up with birds up high rather than birds on the ground, okay? So we've got that. That's all set up. This is all set up. Going to click play now. And we can hear, you can visualize the audio playing here. So we saw the birds just spawn then. There's my drip noises playing. Drips are over there. Bugs are spawning randomly. And every now and then we should get another bird spawning. We heard a couple of them. We know they're there. They might be slightly out of range. Oh, that one wasn't. Okay, so we know this is working. I'm clearly losing my UT99 FPS skills and can't find the sound fast enough, but hopefully we're all getting what's going on. So I wanted to bring this up because this allows you to kind of go out, procedurally have your audio spawning based on the vibe, and then more than that, you can then just place the sounds that need to be there to play in conjunction with it, right? And the whole system is tag-based, so you can set it up to say, hey, right now I want to have this, and we're currently in the biome of like cave.river. And you can set some palettes up to say, I play whenever cave is around, and then other palettes to say, I only care about when the river part of the cave is in there. So you can kind of fine tune when things come in. And I think that's really, really good. Now, I know a lot of you are like, Chris, that doesn't sound that cool of a feature, but I know a bunch of you are probably those poor souls who have had to manually go through and hand place bug noises and wind noises all throughout your map before, and you know the pain you're going through. And if I'm dwelling on this, it's because it's really personal. So I hope I hope those people understand. I can see some very vigorous nods from a few of you, so it's cool. I feel like we're on the same page. So I wanted to make sure that was covered. And the next feature I want to cover is called PCG, which is Procedural Content Generation. Now, awkward thing, I made this presentation before really seeing what the keynote yesterday was going to look like. At which point they came out and they were like, so we're going to procedurally generate an entire forest. And I was like, oh, you have outdone me. So I want to flag that the stuff you saw yesterday is like top tier. I'm going to step you through just some of the fundamentals on how PCG works, just so you kind of get an idea of why these things go together the way that they do. And hopefully when you look at the two of them, you can understand how those things kind of mesh together in the long run. Okay? So I've already placed a PCG volume. It's literally just an empty volume inside the world. But I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create a new PCG graph. And I'm going to call this PCG underscore simple, I guess. And just quickly, I'm going to set the graph to be the one that I just created. And inside of here, I'm going to set the debug to be the one that I added to the world. This will make more sense in just a moment. So let's begin with how this system works. I get this, and if I was to say, hey, I want to go ahead and sample the surface, I'm going to grab that and hit D. D is for debug, and that'll just show me what it's currently doing in the world, which in this case is adding 2 cubes to the world because it's just randomly assigning points within that space, right? If I get that and I'm like, hey, look, I want these to be tiny, tiny squares, and I want to have a bunch of them, you can now see that we're going to add more points within this space, all right? Now, by default, they all have a value called density on them, which is a value from 0 to 1. And that's what's controlling the color there. Whenever the value is 0, they're black. Whenever the value is 1, they're white. And if it's something in between, it's gray. Okay? So we can see that that's working. But why don't I step through just a couple of little easy things. Like, if I want to assign them with a random rotation, I could transform all the points to be 0 to 360, right? And you can now see they're all kind of getting some randomization to them. If I like those points and I was like, hey, this is good, but maybe there's too many points. You know, maybe I want to get some of them and filter them out. I can filter according to this. So I could say, hey, filter out any values that are below 0.5, at which point half those cubes have kind of disappeared, okay? But at the same time, in doing what I just did, we now have only values between 0.5 and 1. Does that make sense? Because those values, we just got rid of all the, like half of them. So I could go ahead and I could remap this if I wanted to, so that these values are now remapped so that 0.5 values are equal to 0. It kind of stretches them out again. And the final thing I'm going to do before kind of making them an actual mesh is I can scale them by density. I feel compelled to straighten out the lines. So I can scale them by density, and I could set the minimum scale to 1 and the maximum scale to 2. And we can now see that that's going to kind of, you know, mix them up a bit. And if I was to make these static meshes instead of the debug thing we've been looking at, I can get this and I can say, hey, I want to have a mesh. That mesh is going to be a mushroom. Let's get that one. I'm going to add another mesh. Okay. And if I go back into here, we now have a bunch of mushrooms. Those mushrooms are all floating in space. So realistically, we kind of want to get that and say, hey, maybe instead of just making you, I also want to project you downwards with just do a ray trace downwards and go down to that. If I go back to it, we now have ground mushrooms. Okay. Now I bring the system up. What I've just done there was pretty simple, but 2 things I want to flag that are super important for people to know and understand why this is cool moving forward. First is this. If I double click on this node called scale by density, this itself is its own little sub blueprint graph. So the nodes that you actually add to PCG can be set up on your own, right? So you can set up all sorts of custom rules around certain kinds of actors within your world, certain attributes that are getting passed around, things to look for, when to make things do what they need to do. You know what I mean? So like, that's the first thing, is you can make them a lot more reactive to your specific project instead of being like, all right, I'm gonna just follow the general rules. Now, the next thing that I wanna flag is that means that this area here kind of just controls the flow of those general rules. And you can do much more interesting stuff. I want to flag that Aaron Langmead has a wonderful talk on the subject that is going on at the Learning Theatre, so you can catch his later if you want to get a 25-minute deep dive on PCG. But with that in, I do want to go ahead and show you like that if I was to grab a spline in the world, it's worth noting that PCG can also be added just as a component to arbitrary actors. And if you've kind of set up some of the logic there, you can then make it go through and kind of hand place these things as well, right? So in this case, they're all being placed along the spline. And if I wanted to, I could get that spline, grab a point and be like, okay, so we can actually kind of set it up to kind of regenerate. And this means that, you know, if you have rivers, it can automatically scatter all the debris along rivers, little reeds and things like that. And if you ever move the river, you don't need to worry about kind of going through and doing all of that again. All right. So the next feature that's kind of coming out is something that's really, really dear to me. This is really, really good. I'm really, really keen on it. I'd like to give you a little bit of backstory about why I'm so keen on it. So I'm going to drag this BP spline into the world. It's called Spline Tendrils. And I'll give you a little bit of backstory. So when I was up-resing this scene, this is an old UE4 scene that I kind of wanted to see what it would look like if I had like given it new life in UE5. a little while back, I made a simple tool that would just lay down splines, right? And all it is you drop a thing in the world and it would just trace out and make a vine that followed that like trace and then make a couple of offshoot vines, right? Not too complicated, kind of cool, but it's worth noting that like this tool was good from a tech art perspective, but not good from a artist's perspective. You know, like an artist doesn't really just want to arbitrarily drop splines into the world and be like, yay, I have vines. We know the artist is going to come back to you and be like, can I have some control on that? So what does an artist version of that look like? So here's where we go through the scriptable tools mode that is available in UE 5.2. It's in the plugins menu. You'll need to enable it for your project, but you can click here. And I want to point out that this is not a native tool, which sounds like a really elaborate way for me to joke about these being non-native vines, but this is not a native tool. The scriptable window stuff is, but I've just kind of made this tool. And if I was to paint into the world while it's selected and we just hang out for a second, you can see that it's gone through and kind of placed that main vine in the world while growing things out from there. And this is actually just laying down the blueprint that I'd created earlier, right? Like it's nothing particularly fancy. And it's still just the blueprint that's there. We can control that. We can tinker with it as needed. And we can kind of make this, follow any other rules to give me something that may feel a bit more organic. Now, I bring this up because getting that tool together that we just saw only really required this much blueprint on the tool side of things, which is generally considered not a lot. Okay, so I'm so confident that I can tell you it's not a lot, that I'm going to go back here. There are a lot of mushrooms in this world. I'm going to go back here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to step through creating a tool from scratch, okay? And I just want you to get an idea of what this looks like now and why this is a feature that's really dear to me in 5.2. And that is that let's quickly just roll through what's required. I'm going to make a snow tool, okay? I want to make it that I can go into the world and just paint a whole bunch of snow into the world, and then when it's done, have snow. I want to have something that doesn't make me feel like I need to go back to another package, export that model, bring it in, and if anything ever changes, deal with that. I feel like I just called physical pain in one of you who seems like I guess you've done that before. Sorry about that. So what do the steps look like for going through that process? First off, I'm going to need a tool that we can open up and, drop into the world. Next, I'm going to need to be able to left click on something and place a snow actor or something of the sort into the world. After that, I'm going to need to be able to drag my mouse to paint blobs that eventually, when I release the mouse, is going to get all merged together and turned into snow. Does that make sense to everyone? Like, those are the kind of steps we'll need here. And let's look at what that looks like if we're building that. I'm going to go to Editor Utilities and create an Editor Utility blueprint. And instead of inheriting from one of these common classes, I'm going to go over to here and type in the word script. And you can see that we have Editor Scriptable Click, Editor Scriptable Interactive, and Editor Scriptable Drag tool, okay? So these are all just different types of functionality for different types of tools. In this situation, I'm going to create a drag tool, and I'm going to call this Snow Tool, okay? And the second I give this a name, Snow, we can then open this up, go to here, and under my tools belt, I can now see that I have a snow tool available to me, right? So we're on the right track, but now we've got to add some logic to it. But let's just step through the steps that I gave you before. So to begin with, I'm going to say, hey, whenever you're testing if I can or cannot click right now, let's do that. Let's go ahead and say, hey, get the ray, find the start and the end position of where I've clicked, and see what that looks like. Let's just trace out, say, 5,000 units. I want to make this a line trace by channel. Wonderful. So that's now going to trace out and be like, did you click on something? And if that's a no, then that is a miss. But if that is a hit, so if we have hit something, let's follow that logic through. If that is a hit, then I'm going to want to get this. Oh, sorry, false. There we go. I'm going to spawn actor from class. Okay? And we're going to spawn. Actually, I can use this one. There we go. And I'm going to spawn a dynamic mesh actor, which is just something that I can kind of make some 3D modeling in. Going to grab the location and just hardwire that in as the location that it's going into. And I'm going to promote this to a variable. So output, it's going to be called like my mesh actor. So we've kind of created that. It's going to create an object in the world at that location. Okay. Now the next thing I'm going to need to do is get the dynamic mesh of that. So this is the actual 3D model inside of that actor. Okay. I'm going to get that, and I'm just going to add a sphere. It's called a sphere box because it's a sphere with box projected UVs. Okay, if you're wondering why it's got such a strange name. The last thing I'm going to need to do here is kind of set up the radius. And let's randomize this to be between like 2 centimeters and 7 centimeters. That sounds good. And finally, I'm going to need to give it a location that is going to be a relative to the mesh that we created. So I'm just going to go ahead and get the actor transform. Again, I'm not too fussed if you're like, dude, I don't know inverse transforms. What are you doing to me? I'm okay with that because it's more important to me that you know that these kind of things are possible and you go out and suss it out when you get home. But that is pretty much golden. All right. The very last thing I need to do is tell it that, yes, I did actually successfully click on something. And that is going to be called make hit, which I'm just going to tell it has a depth of whatever the trace distance was. Okay. This is just saying, yes, you did successfully click on something. Don't close the tool. And all I've done so far, and this is, don't worry, it'll get cooler in a second, is I've now got the ability to go snow and click, and you can see enhance. We now have a sphere over here, all right? But let's go ahead and finish the tool off. Now, I'm going to apologize to every programmer in the audience right now who's watching me, as instead of creating a function, I'm just copying and pasting code. But in my defense, I'm doing it live, and we have a time limit. So I'm going to go in here. I'm just going to grab the function for updating position, which is what happens while you drag. I swear there's a payoff coming, all right? It's going to trace out again. This time I don't need to care about did we hit or miss. And instead of spawning the actor entirely, I'm actually just going to get the one that we already created and reference that. All right, almost there. So with that in play, I've now got a snow tool where I can paint a bunch of spheres into the world. Don't worry, we're getting somewhere more interesting. So, all right, I can see that's a bit better. Last step, though, is what happens when we finish, right? Sorry, I'm not great with this keyboard. So whenever we finish, let's go through the motions. First off, I need to set the material to be something that looks snowy, okay? After we've set something that is snowy, I'm going to get the dynamic mesh, and I'm going to go ahead and just take a couple of steps here. So we've got it. First thing I need to do is voxelize it. And we have a great thing here called apply mesh morphology, which will kind of stick them all together. I'm going to make it do that within, say, a 5 centimeter radius. I think that'll look good. After we've kind of stuck it all together, I'm going to go ahead and smooth it. Let's smooth it, say, 10, 12, 15 times. So that'll now kind of get the voxelization that we've made and go and be a lot cleaner. After that, we probably want to have some UVs on this that actually look okay. So let's project some UVs onto it. And I'm going to set the UVs to be maybe 100 units. And finally, the last little bit that we have is I want to displace the mesh. So I want to project the wind displacement map onto this thing, which is going to be wind. And I'm going to need to set some options on that because I want it to be the blue channel. And let's displace it, say, 10 centimeters. And in theory, if I've done my job right, we can now click in the world. All right. And then when I release, have snow. All right. Cool. So as I said, like, that's what... look, I get really excited, same as everyone else, about Nanite, about Lumen, about all of the other big ticket items coming there. But at the end of the day, I'm also a person that has a whole lot of tasks I need to get through, right? And when I see the ability to easily create tools and easily have people within a team create the stuff that's right for them without too much in the way, that's the thing that gets me really excited, right? So that's why for me personally, this is my favorite feature coming into 5.2. There's a lot of really good stuff coming in though. This has just been kind of like a small fraction of it all. But I hope this session has been useful. Stick around. We have Sam Bass going his session in just a little bit. That's going to be on UEFN. Otherwise though, I hope you all have a wonderful GDC. And if you have any questions, I'll be lingering around over there. Thank you very much.